Our presenter for today is no stranger to our joint lodge meetings. Last July, he presented the Homing Signal Within, the Voice of the Silence. And today, he comes back to us with a sequel, and he will teach us how to attune to that homing signal. So without further ado, let us all welcome our brother Shikhar Agnihotri, who is in Adyar, India. Shikhar.
Thank you, Brother Charlie. Can I share my screen now?
Yes,
go ahead.
Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Dear sisters, brothers, and friends from all around the globe, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon whichever continent you are on. And hearty greetings from Adya to all of you. It is a matter of great honor and pleasure to be with everyone again. And as you know, that today's session is a continuation of the subject that we discussed last August, the homing signal within. But we could not discuss one of the aspects last time, that was how to remain in constant touch with this inner guide so as to have a peaceful and harmonious life. But there is nothing that we are going to study new. We are going to refresh that we have already studied. So, as Sister Sullivan also just mentioned, just a small statement from the last session. We discussed in the last session that there is a faculty within each and every one of us, the working of which is not the same as that of the mind. And unlike the mind, which works by comparing and arranging various images received by different senses, this faculty, Buddhi or intuition or Prajna, grasps all connections and grants us the vision of the whole. That's why it is beyond the mind, and it corresponds to the Buddhic consciousness in humans, indicating the unity of life as contrasted with the individual or sense of separateness that we get from the mind. But before we even talk about the ways and the means through which we can try to attune ourselves with this faculty of the higher self, there is some preparation to be done. It is like a necessary condition or a prerequisite to come into touch with oneself. And what is this prerequisite? It is something that we all normally do in our daily life. A very simple but very important and effective aspect of successful communication. And that is, when someone starts a conversation with us or call our name to start a conversation, what is the first thing that we normally do or should do to understand better what is being said or communicated? We turn towards that person or the event. If not turn physically, we turn at least our attention towards the person or the event. The similar thing is required here. And since the signal, the homing signal or the voice or light is coming from within, so we can safely say that the required condition is to be introvert. Not in the conventional or social terms, which is attached to this world, which means being shy or restrained. Instead, introvertier in its real meaning, which is from Latin to turn within. And in mid-17th century, it implied the turn one's thoughts inwards in spiritual contemplation. A similar effort is mentioned as one of the limbs of the eightfold yoga of Patanjali, which is prior to concentration, meditation, or contemplation. It is known as we can see, pratyahara, which implies withdrawing of the attention from the outside world and turning off the attention within, just like a tortoise withdraws its limbs within when it senses some danger. In the same manner, withdrawing our surplus energy from the world of senses. Why surplus? Because we still need some energy to do our daily routine activities. But we have to stop the leakage of our energy in different directions without any discrimination. Why? Because the work that we are going to do requires a lot of energy. It requires a lot of concentrated energy because a lot of changes that takes place in our psyche, in our bodies. And if we do not have enough energy to balance those phenomena, then of course they might bring some negative results or no results at all. The similar action has been given by J. Krishnamurti when he talks about taking a retreat. He says that it is essential sometimes to go to retreat, to stop everything that we have been doing, to stop our beliefs and experiences completely and look at them anew, not keep on repeating like machines, whether we believe or do not believe. We would then let in fresh air into our minds. But as everyone may know from experience, that it is not so easy to turn within all of a sudden in the world, because we are surrounded by so many objects of desire being constantly thrown at us. And the whole structure of the society, the whole structure of the world is aimed for pushing everyone more and more towards materialism and consumerism. And so, what are those situations in life when one has more possibility of turning within? The first possible way or means we can think of is by one's own choice or nature. And if we observe around, there are some people who are naturally interested to study the workings of inner life. For them, it seems effortless to understand the deeper aspects of life and laws of nature. For them, being alone is not at all the same as being lonely. They are not afraid of being alone. But whatever these things are, all these things basically implies that they have brought this nature from the efforts of the past life. They have not been gifted by God or so. They have made the efforts in the past life, and so now we can see that they are making a natural choice, which is called their prarabdha karma. The second way is a means of turning within is pain and suffering, whether individual or collective. Pain and suffering is one factor that is very important in this aspect, because we are conditioned to think of pain or suffering as something negative. But in fact, if we see that when a person is surrounded by pleasures, comforts, and favorable conditions all the time, there is not much inner growth. Instead, degradation happens if the person is not aware, and because all the energies are flowing outward. But the moment pain or suffering or obstacles come in life, all the unnecessary things are cut off automatically. I mean, our attention doesn't go in that direction even. And the attention is concentrated on the most essential things and energies. And to some extent, we can say we turn within. So basically, pain or suffering is helping us in turning within. So looking from this angle, pain or suffering Do we think of them as some adversaries, our enemies, or something bad, or they have to be looked upon as our friend? Does it not mean that whenever there is a challenging situation in life, it has come to help us for our growth, for our benefit, only if we can see it? It is like a friction that helps us in walking. The friction between the foot and the earth helps us in walking till the time we have learned to fly. And pain and suffering is not due to the displeasure of God, whom we imagine to be sitting up somewhere to hurt us or to teach us a lesson for our sins. Instead, it is a compassionate reaction of law of karma for us to learn and grow. And if we learn the right lesson, we will come out of it as even stronger and wiser. And the same thing applies in the case of group karmic consequences, like the one we are having at present. The quantum and the reach of the effects of COVID-19 makes it obvious that it is a karmic consequence of the group karma of humanity. And although it is bringing difficult times in the daily life of many people, it has brought many challenging things. At the same time, in the larger panorama of life, it is an opportunity forced upon us for turning within and introspect. And then the third way or means, probable reason for turning within, which is quite amusing, which may be quite amusing to many, which is not given its due, I think, and we all may even have a big laugh about it, but it is very important aspect of the human life, which, if handled rightly, helps us in turning within. And I assume that most of us at some point of time in life must have experienced it. It is boredom or pursuit of more pleasure, we can say. The capacity of human mind to feel bored or feel discontented with whatever it has and longing for more or different or new experience is a very valuable aspect of being human. It is this feeling on the exploitation of which are built upon so many businesses in the world. On a lighter note, I would like to say that it is a kind of a chip that is fixed in our constitution, in the divine plan, and it is a fail-safe mechanism that never lets us satisfied with anything material in nature, anything that has an existence outside of us, even God outside of us. Imagine what could have happened if we were satisfied with something, with some object or pleasure of the material world. We would never ever have turned within. We would be satisfied with that object or pleasure. In fact, that very object then would become a god for us. But this feeling of boredom is the result of the fact that the peace of mind and bliss cannot be found in anything external. Pleasure, yes. Excitement, yes. But for them, for peace and bliss to be there, they have to come from within and not from without, because anything that comes from outside brings along with it the sense of fear of being taken away. So in that terms, it cannot be absolute. So in that sense, being able to feel boredom is kind of a spiritual quality, because how many times have we seen an animal or a plant being bored? Because they follow their instinct, they have a fixed software, they can go on doing things the same way over and over again and never feel bored about it. And this is the value of the human life, or the stage of evolution called human, where we can consciously work to accelerate or retard our growth. Now that we have turned inwards and ready to listen to this homing signal, what other aspects are there to work upon to be in constant touch with intuition? The ground is prepared, the seeds have to be sown. But to know which seeds to sow, one must know what fruits he or she is aiming at. And our aim is to look into the conditions that are required for intuition to enlighten the mind, for intuition to have a good reflection on the mind. And the only impediment or obstacle in this process are the modifications of the mind, which means that the conditions that are required for intuition to enlighten the mind are to calm down the mind and to purify the mind. Considering the mind as a water body, which is to reflect the Buddhic consciousness, or let's say in this case, the moon, it will be only able to have a clear reflection if there are no wave movements, and also if it is not covered with the impurities like marine growth. So if there are waves, if there is motion of the water on the water, the reflection of the moon will be blurred or broken. And if there is marine growth on the surface of the water, there will be no image at all. So now the bigger question is how to make that happen, or at least how to try to make an effort in that direction. And Theosophy explains it so beautifully that it is almost clinical in its working. And here comes the secret of all spiritual disciplines or the different paths of yoga or Theosophy. And as I said earlier, we are not going to study anything new or different, but yes, we are going to refresh what we have already studied. So to begin with, we will take the three limbs of theosophical life, which is SMS as we know them, study, meditation, and selfless service, and see how it helps in this process. And then we will discuss a couple of more ways to see what more things we can do. And I'm sure most of us are fully aware of these. But today, we are going to see the science behind them and understand how deceptively simple tools they are for such a magnificent destination. So I would like to start this study aspect with a statement by HPB, which says that it is required of a member that when a question arises, it shall be deeply thought over from all its aspects to the end, that he may find the answer himself. And in no case shall questions be asked out of curiosity, nor until the person has exhausted every ordinary means of solving the doubt or of acquiring himself the information sought. Otherwise, his intuition will never be developed. He will not learn self-reliance. I think a sufficiently self-explanatory statement by HPB, and maybe that is why, if we remember the days of Pythagoras in his school, in his esoteric school, there was a discipline that the students will not speak for the first few years, maybe I think about 6 years, they were not allowed to speak. Not that they are not given the opportunity. It does not mean that the opportunity to ask questions was taken away from them. But if on the slightest tinge of curiosity, we start asking questions, we will never go within. And as she says, the intuition will never be developed. So now with this reference, if we try to observe most of the spiritual literature in general, and the theosophical literature in particular, it is aimed to develop, to unfold our Buddhic nature. The beauty of any spiritual text is that there is not only one meaning to the aphorisms, but depending upon the depth of one's consciousness, one can draw as much from it as possible. And for example, Swami T. Subbarao told C.W. Leadbeater that the aphorisms of light on the path holds within them 7 layers of meaning, which can not only guide the aspirant, a new aspirant at the beginning of the path, but also the initiates who are at the higher levels of evolution. And I'm sure we all have experienced this feeling, because so often we find that while reading the book, the same book, when we read it a couple of years before, we understood something. But when we are reading it now, we get a totally new meaning. It depends, it means nothing has changed, but our consciousness has evolved in that time and we are able to get some new meaning out of it. But how does such scriptures or literature help in making our mind calm and pure and elevating our understanding to help intuition enlighten our brain, mind? And here comes a very interesting way of the presentation of these teachings. If we observe deeply, we find that most of these teachings are presented in the form of small aphorisms, which are normally given in the form of paradoxes or parables, allegories, or both. And if we take, for example, light on the path as an example, we see that the paradox is not just within the aphorism but outside also. By which I mean, if we take the first aphorism, it says, kill out ambition, but it also says, but work like those who are ambitious. Later it says, kill the desire of life or sensation. And the later part it says, desire power or peace or possessions. So it kinds of leads the person who is reading that to some confusion. Similarly, when Lord Krishna was talking to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, he was telling him various ways of finding out the right action for him, and he was telling one after the other. Arjuna got confused and he says that I am totally confused with your contradicting or paradoxical statements, because on one hand you are saying this is the best way, on another, in the next statement you are saying something else. And even if we look at Zen Buddhism, the way of teaching is based on paradoxical stories or riddles called koans. But this looks like paradox only when viewed by the mind. And there must be some reason why such presentations are made in a paradoxical way, which HPB explains in one sentence in The Secret Doctrine when she says that such are the traditional modes of teaching by provoking perplexity. Similarly, in understanding metaphors or allegories, one has, which are in abundance in every religious scripture of any religion, one has to make an effort to develop imagination, correlation, and intuition. But the question arises, why? Why is it given in such a form? Why not in a simple form so everybody can understand easily? So let us try to explore this together. The question arises, who is facing the paradox or who is not able to comprehend? Obviously, when we are reading through our mind. So it is the mind that is facing the paradox, or to be technically correct, we can say that it is the lower mind that is the facing the paradox in the statement. Although there is no paradox from a higher point of view, which we will see later. But when we are reading through the mind, lower mind, we see the paradox. So what happens when the mind faces a paradox? Of course, it becomes uncomfortable because our mind is trained to work in a certain way that it needs clarifications of the answers. And when it sees a mutual contradictory things, it becomes uncomfortable. So what happens next? If it is an open and sincere mind, then it comes out of its comfort zone. And here comes the significance of the open mind, because otherwise what happens is that unwilling to change due to its rigidity, bigotry, we ignore or disagree right away with whatever is being said and discard it as impractical or impossible and lose the opportunity to go deeper within ourselves. And if we carefully observe, J. Krishnamurti has always been trying to do that, to bring people out of their comfort zone of theories, philosophies, to provoke perplexity by questioning their belief system, and to look at the things as they are so the shell of the conditioning can be broken. So, what happens when our mind comes out of our comfort zone? The sincere mind thinks over that aphorism or whatever we are studying, it contemplates upon it. And then what happens is just what HPB recommended in her statement that we discussed in the beginning, that we should avoid that urge of impatience to get the answer quickly and just go to someone and ask it, whom we think knows the answer. We don't go to anyone, we just stay with that thing that we have studied, and with patience one continues to contemplate until a stage arises when, due to this mental exercise, the mind has become exhausted, or peaceful rather, I would say, and relatively pure. But how does this happen? Just like the muscles of the physical body are stressed when we do some exercise, and after the exercise they need rest, so they are at rest. Similarly, when we are thinking on a particular subject continuously, that is, we are doing a mental exercise, it creates a stress and unrest in our brain. So it is no more able, what every one of us must have experienced at some point of time. And due to that, mind is not able to work through the brain. So for a time, it comes in a state of rest or peace. That is easy to understand. But how does it become pure? Just like the quality of the cells of the physical body is dependent upon the kind of food we intake. Similarly, the quality of matter in the mental body depends on the kind of thoughts that we are engaged in. And as we can see in this picture, in this image of subtler bodies of human being, that whichever kind of emotion or thoughts we are engaged in, we attract all those vibrations in our body. Whether it is love or hatred, fear, anger, depression, and we cover ourselves completely with these kind of thoughts and emotions, just like the same frequency material we bring in our body, and the remaining one we send out from our body. So in this case, what we were discussing, we are engaged in thinking on a highly spiritual aphorisms, which, when continued for a long time regularly, replaces gradually the coarser quality of matter from the mental body, from our psyche, and by a much finer and purer matter, and thus the mind becomes pure. And what happens next? In this condition of peace and purity, the light of intuition, buddhi, dawns, and the understanding or realization of that particular thing is there in a fraction of a second. It is just a way from our daily life. If we take a couple of examples, it is just the way butter is made out of milk. How is butter made? If we have seen, we go on churning the milk. And if the person is new, maybe he will be a little bit impatient. Oh, the butter is not yet formed. Am I doing it correctly or not correctly? So, but after avoiding all these urges of impatience, if one continues to do that churning, suddenly the butter appears out of nowhere. So that way, if we go on churning our mind with whatever we are studying, we are we will force our intuition to enlighten our mind, and in a fraction of a second. And probably for the same reason, the same thing H.P. Blavatsky has mentioned in a little but very valuable booklet known as Practical Occultism. And I'm sure most of us must have read that book and must have found many appealing statements in that for our daily life. One such statement that I came across, which is sometimes ignored or neglected due to feeling that it is an exaggeration of the facts. But since HPB also says that in occultism, nothing is exaggeration, whatever is said is meant, so we should take that statement very seriously when she says to contemplate for as many hours on the subject as many minutes we have studied. We can think of the implications, because normally we are so in a hurry to finish a book or finish an article or whatever, that this very important advice is missed, that to contemplate for as many hours on the subject as many minutes we have studied. It may sound like an exaggeration, but it carries a lot of depth and science that we have just discussed. And what more to say? So many scientific discoveries have taken in such a manner, as we discussed in the last session that we had in August, that when the scientist was engaged in this inquiry within, completely immersed in that thinking, suddenly the solution shines in the mind. And thus, by way of paradoxes and metaphors, when studied and contemplated upon, sooner or later we get a glimpse of hidden meaning by the light of intuition. And this is a kind of exercise that we can also give or have for ourselves, that once we have such kinds of signs or signals within, we can strengthen them by giving it an exercise. As HPV says, that when a student in her collected writing, she has explained this in a form of question and answer, and the student is asking, tell me some ways by which intuition is to be developed. And the sage replies, first of all, by giving it exercise. And second, by not using it for purely personal ends. Exercise means that it must be followed through mistakes and bruises until from sincere attempts at use, it comes to its own strength. We should, now this is also very important, we should add the study of the works of those who in the past have trodden this path and found out what is the real and what is not. Unquote. So that's what she has said to include in our study, which can, and how to approach the study, that is the most important thing. And that is the reason why study is given so much importance in the Theosophical Society. And although the lecture from outside may be of help to some extent, the real solutions depend on how deeply we delve into what we hear or what we study. Now, the second part that we were talking is meditation, how we can help our intuition enlighten our mind. I'm sure most of the brethren here present know the importance of meditation, and the regular meditation sessions are also being conducted. So I don't think there is something new that I'm going to share, but we can observe that in many of the cases, meditation these days has become a business and is advertised as a means of getting what one desires or wants, while the real meditation means freedom from personal desire or wanting. And that is why our consciousness and hence our daily life becomes fragmented. Because if we think that a particular method is meditation, and then we go on doing it without bringing any change in our daily life, and without bringing a change in our approach, and thus we try to create an imaginary life line between our spiritual life and our practical life, and there is no change, perceivable change in us whatsoever. But the question is whether meditation is different or separate from the daily life. Just now we talked about science and effect of study. The very same study becomes meditation when we add one more dimension to it. Till now, we were studying a book, a scripture, or something else outside, which is, of course, is good and recommended always. But now we also start the study of that book, which all of us have. And the special thing about this book is that everyone's book is unique. And no one else can study that book for us. And that book is the book of our life. And what is life as we know it? Life is nothing but the movement in space or time and time of self or consciousness. And when we start to study our own self, then it really becomes self-study, a study by the higher self of the lower self, and that is real meditation. Real in the sense that we have not turned meditation into yet another method to have some kind of transcendental experience, which is not affecting or influencing our daily life. Instead, we start being choicelessly aware of our body, emotions, desires, and thoughts, as J. Krishnamurti has mentioned. And then this whole process becomes meditation. But it is natural that our mind, which is used to so much activity outwardly, that is not easy for it to immediately become like this. And that is why initially one can try for sitting meditation, take some time out alone without any disturbances, just like when we plant a new sapling, we put around it a tree guard to protect it from any cattle or any harm. So similarly, we can sit for meditation and we continue that very good practice, but at the same time, we try to carry that influence of sitting into rest of the daily life. And we all know that in Theosophy, there is no fixed method of meditation for everyone. Only there are some broad guidelines, because in TS we understand that everyone is different and that no method is meditation in itself. Methods are there to make the mind concentrated. And when with this concentrated mind, we become aware of our lower nature, of ourself, then something happens. What happens is that we start becoming aware of our prejudices, how the religion, caste, creed, etc. affects our smallest of actions, and how we behave in a different manner depending upon the social status of the person who is standing in front of us, or of how much use is that person for me, that decides my interaction with him. And when we start living like this, with awareness in every interaction of ours, whether it is with humans, animals, plants, then every interaction of ours becomes a learning opportunity. And learning about one's ignorance, one's self-created limitations is the first step towards wisdom. And in such a state of mind, our family members, our friends, the near and dear ones whom we take for granted very often become our teacher. Actually, the whole existence then become our teacher, and The statement of HPB becomes so true that no one is my enemy, no one is my friend, everyone is alike my teacher. But the question again arises, how just by becoming aware and not doing anything makes the mind calm and purer? It is a very natural question because from the very childhood, we are being taught and trained to do something, to struggle hard about the situation, to change the outcome. But at the same time, most of us must have experienced that many times when we do not interfere, the situation resolves itself in a much better and harmonious way as compared to when we interfered. Because when we are interfering with our limited sight, with the impulse of our egotism, with a separate sense of separateness. But when the law of karma is taking its course, it is working holistically. So that way, if we see, many times just waiting with patience is the best action for the things to resolve. But one thing that happens very often is that many times it is a concern that why no change happen in personal nature even after doing meditation for a long time. There may be many reasons, but one of the most common that any Besant mentions is irregularity. Sometimes we sit for meditation for an hour and then forget about it altogether for many days. And then we sit for some time and then we forget about it. This haphazard way of meditation, even if continued for many years, is not going to help. So even if we start for a couple of minutes, few minutes, but we must aim to do it regularly and daily for the best results. But how does it make our mind calm? I would just like to share a short story. I don't know if this story is true or is it just made up for making a point or whatever it is. But as long as we can gather something from that, it would be worthwhile to share that once a guru and his disciple were walking towards the monastery in hot, sunny afternoon. And after walking for a certain time, their water was finished. So at a place near a tree, they stopped, and the guru told his disciple if he can go and find some water body nearby, a pond or something, so that he can bring water to at least wash or drink. So the disciple followed and he went around. So luckily he found a water body nearby, but approaching near, he saw that when he went there, a couple of buffaloes were coming out or crossing that pond. After they have crossed, he went close to the water, but he found the water all muddy and dirty. And he thought instantly that, oh my God, this water is so dirty. It is not good enough to wash, let alone drinking. And on watching that scene, he came back and told his guru that this was the situation. The guru then told him to wait. And they stayed there for a certain time. And then again, the guru told him, okay, now you go and bring the water from the same place. He said, but the water was dirty. Why are you sending me again? The guru said, you please go again. And this time when he went, to his surprise, the water was clean. And even surprised, he collected the water and all the time thinking that his guru is like something really a big, having siddhis or power or a magician who can do such a thing by sitting so far away. So he came back, he gave the water to his guru and told him everything. The guru then gave him a very important lesson of life, that it is not magic or power of any kind that he did, but the simple thing is understanding the laws of nature or laws of physics, if we say, then and the observation of the event patiently. If the mud is floating in the water, we just have to wait till the mud or thing it settles down and the top water is free from it. The more we try to interfere, the more we try to do something, the more, for the much longer time, the mud will remain floating and the water will be dirty. And so, gradually, similarly, when the contents of our subconscious come to the surface and do not get the energy of the mind, when we do not pay any attention to them, I see within me vibrations rising, but when I do not pay attention to them, I am not giving my mental energy to them, they die down. And in this process of meditation, the mind becomes calm and clean. Why? Because it is getting rid of the conditionings, the sanskaras that are coming out on the surface, and if we are not making the new ones, and thus inviting the intuition to enlighten the next step. And now we come to the service part. This is something, selfless service rather, sorry. This is something which is universally recommended in every spiritual path. We discussed about study, meditation, and now in a very proper order, we come to selfless service. Because this selfless service is not just any kind of service, but it is something that is born out of study and meditation. Or on the reverse, it is the service that brings meditation and study along with it. And this is the benchmark of the success of study and meditation, that it results in selfless service. If it is not happening, then it is time to look within, that are we caught up in the cycle of self-gratification and only interested in superficial changes and not the regeneration? But let us try to go deeper and see what is selfless service. Is it just an act of charity that is performed on a particular day or time on a big scale? Or is it an approach towards life? And just like study and meditation, selfless service is an attitude, not just an act, in which one is always aware of the situations to be useful to his surroundings, to his environment, in big or small way, that is not at all important. But as long as we are aware of such situations where our help is needed, and not just within the set patterns of social charity life. Maybe that is why, with similar intent, the famous philosopher of 19th century, Ralph Waldo Emerson, has said that the purpose of life is not to be happy, but to be useful. Unquote. Because the more useful we become, the more useful we are, the more happy we become as a byproduct. But if we aim at happiness, that we can acquire happiness by possessing something, we are in that endless pursuit of happiness, which will never come to us. And earlier, we talked about intuition, how it works and enlightens us when the conditions are ready. And we all saw that how study or meditation both work upon the mind to be calm and purer, because then only light of wisdom can clearly be seen. But how does service helps in purification? The biggest assistance of selfless service, if one is sincere, is the purification of the heart, of the motive. In Vivek Chudamani, Sri Shankaracharya very clearly says that one does not get liberation by doing any effort, but the effort purifies the heart. And pure heart is absolutely necessary for the wisdom to shine. And each selfless thought is an opportunity provided by our higher self in this direction of universal brotherhood. So each such thought must be put into practice as soon as possible, and to do our duty at all times so as to fulfill the real meaning of duty, which is due to humanity. And here comes one very strong statement by H.P. Blavatsky when she says that it's not just enough to study. What she says is, we must not only be unselfish, but must do all the duties that karma has given us. And thus, intuition will cut the road of duty and the true path of life. The power to know does not come from book study nor from mere philosophy, but mostly from the actual practice of altruism in deed, word, and thought. For that practice purifies the covers of the soul and permits that light to shine down into the brain mind. And these are the three ways given by various sages under various names, be it of yoga, of knowledge, of devotion, of action, or as the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali says, tapa, swadhyaya, ishwar pranidhan, devotion, study, or austerity, because these three aspects work on the three dimensions of our physical, astral, and mental existence. And as long as we continue to decide by our kama manas, there will always be sense of separateness. But when gradually, with this purification, we are able to think from our buddhi manas, there shall be no hesitation in action, and that action will be integrated and holistic, and more importantly, in the direction of unity of life, which is the trademark of the Buddhic consciousness. So, these were the significant ways of attuning ourselves with the intuition or the homing signal. But apart from that, there are few other possible ways which can be experimented with, because as an aspirant, one should try all the rightly available means for the desired result. And it is with this reference I would like to share few thoughts about Gayatri Mantra. The science of mantra is very ancient and was practiced in one way or other in all parts of the world. The mantra science was developed by the ancient scientists whom we call rishis in India and seers all around the world. And the science of mantra is basically the science of cosmic powers of sound, thought, and willpower. And the word mantra itself is explained as mananta iti mantra, meaning that which is reflected upon, pondered upon, meditated upon, to transcend the normal state of consciousness, to go beyond the normal state of consciousness. So mantra is like a seed which is nurtured by our constant remembrance. It sprouts and takes root in our consciousness, and gradually the hidden wisdom becomes a part of our being when it is said to be actualized. Thus, it is not just a mechanical repetition or recitation of some words verbally or mentally, but with intelligence and understanding that brings about the real effect of a mantra. So today we are going to talk about the Gayatri Mantra that has been chanted all over India since a long time and presently in many parts of the world due to its remedial and highly perceivable positive effects on our whole being, as already proved by multiple experiments, and the experiments are still going on. Even J. Krishnamurti in 1925 wrote in his notes that this mantra has been repeated in India for many centuries. That is why the land is sacred. And not just that, as per the aphorism 92 of the Madhyam Nikaya, the middle book known as Sella Sutta, the Buddha is quoted as saying that of sacrifices, he was saying while describing the significance of various aspects of life, he says, of sacrifices, the fire sacrifice is the chief. Of Vedic hymns, Savitri is the foremost. And Savitri is another name for Gayatri Mantra because the deity of the Gayatri Mantra is solar Logos, the Surya Narayana, one of whose names in Sanskrit is Savitri. So that is why the name Savitri. And the reason that we are discussing this mantra here lies not just in its meaning, which we are going to share in a few moments, but also the effect that it produces as per the clairvoyant investigation of Gayatri Mantra done by eminent theosophist C.W. Leadbeater in 1925 in Bharat Samaj Temple in the Theosophical Society, Adyar. But for the meaning of the mantra goes that we meditate upon that adorable radiance of the divine sun. May he energize our Buddhi, or may he energize our Prajna or our highest intuitions. And it is a pleasure to share this because it is the first time in modern history, human history, that a scientific description is given of what actually happens when a mantra is chanted properly. And to my knowledge, there is no other instrument developed till date by modern science that has been able to perceive this. But maybe in future, more sensitive instruments will be able to confirm that was stated in 1925. What C.W. Leadbeater observed was that when the Gayatri Mantra is chanted, something utterly unthinkable and marvelous happens. He says, the great shaft of golden white light, which immediately pours down upon and into the reciter, comes as though from the physical sun in whatever direction the sun may happen to be. And I would repeat it. He says that the great shaft of light which immediately pours down upon and into the reciter comes as though from the physical sun in whatever direction the sun may happen to be. But just to reaffirm, I mean, that all these things he was viewing from his clairvoyance, so these are not possible to see from our fleshy eyes, just like there are with so many other vibrations that we are not able to see beyond the visible spectrum or 3G or 4G rays or infrared or ultraviolet rays, but their effects can be measured. So that's what he said, that light comes. But this is not just it. What he further says, that when this light has filled the very soul of the reciter, something even more astonishing happens. What happens is that this ray of light is divided into 7 rays, and they come out of the reciter in the front of the reciter in the form of solid cones of light, in fact having the 7 colors of the spectrum. It is as though as the person who is chanting is acting as a prism, the only difference being that instead of the rays spreading out, because when the rays are passed through a prism, they separate. The white ray when goes from the prism, the outcome is that the rays spreads and separate. Here, the rays are originating from the aura of the person. The whole aura of the person acts as the base, as you can see in the picture. And from that, the rays come out, but instead of spreading, they are converging in front of the reciter that he specifically mentions. And these points are not just any points, they are living centers of energy. And if a person happens to come in the way of them, that point curves with incredible rapidity and touches the heart and the brain of that person, causing them to glow momentarily in response, which implies that the Gayatri mantra in some way affects the spiritual growth of the person and those around him and bestows upon the reciter innumerable benefits. But the most important thing is it is not and can never be a replacement for the sincere effort by a seeker to bring about a transformation in his character. If we think just by chanting the mantra and continuing with the life as usual, something is going to happen, I don't think so. On the other hand, if the seeker has a sincere aspiration of self-transformation, working on oneself, the mantra will help in bringing about this transformation in a more smoother manner. But what about those who do not know Sanskrit? So C.W. Leadbeater further says that as to the question of the language of the mantra, it seems to be of minor importance. And the recitation of the translation in English, having the full intention behind them, produced the full effects. So basically, it is the inherent power of intention, the motive, the will, and the thought power that works. And next, although the time is about to end, I just still have few things to share, and that I think it's better to share. It's about few more minutes. After this, there is a small part that although we discussed in study aspect, that whatever we eat affects the cells of our body, affects the receptivity of our body, the response, the vibrations of the cells of the body. So a small statement by HPB, because food is a very important part of our daily life. And HPB says very clearly in Key to Theosophy that if one could live without eating, of course it would. So the best thing is that if we can live without food, but as the matter stands, he must eat to live. And so we advise really earnest students to eat such food as will least clog and weight their brains and bodies, and will have the smallest effect in hampering and retarding the development of their intuition, their inner faculties and powers. So it is for this reason that the vegetarian diet is preferred to achieve the desired result. In the end, what we talked about can be the means for an aspirant on a spiritual path. But there is much greater need to convey this to the future of humanity, the children, the youth. And I think that from the very childhood, no children or youth are so much interested. Some of them are interested, but not so much interested in deep study or meditation. So what can be done for them? How right from the childhood they can have this approach towards life? How can we help them? Because if a generation of humanity learns all this right from the childhood, a new world can be created in just one generation. And to do this, we need to change our approach to children as parents, guardians, or teachers, and the education that we are giving them. And since the time is limited, I would only read a couple of statements by H.P. Blavatsky and J. Krishnamurti to emphasize the point that we are having here, that instead of waiting till the old age to work when we have so strong conditionings and to remove them again, working hard, why not to help them start right from the childhood? And the first thing is the encouraging hobby or talent of a child. And HPB says that we may think that we would endeavor to deal with each child as a unit and to educate it so as to produce the most harmonious and equal unfoldment of its powers in order that its special aptitudes should find their full natural development. We may think that it is a very small issue, but it is the one that carries deep implications because hobbies or talents are something on which the soul has been working for its evolution for a long time. And if we are helping the child to get along with those hobbies and talents, basically he is following his heart and not for money, as J. Krishnamurti says in the next statement, that human beings have capacity, have some kind of hidden talent that is to paint, to play the violin, to play the flute, or to be a very good human being. And the society, the parents, everybody tells them become a businessman or a doctor or an engineer. So the brain is conditioned by the parents, the society in which we live. So our own talent is destroyed by this pressure. And what is important is to have our own talent. Then you are happy with it because then we are in harmony with our inner homing signal. So we have to discover our own talent and stick to that talent. Whether you become poor, rich, or successful, unquote. And when that happens, the individual will not just look for employment, but vocation, meaning a call. It is an occupation which person is especially drawn to or for which they are suited. Because right now, as we can see, that how the modern education is ruining the inner faculties, creating so much stress in the students, so many suicides are happening because the link to the higher faculties, the link to the inner self is stressed, is almost, I would not say broken, but there is very less communication in that path. So all these things are happening, and who is responsible for this is what HPB says, that you forget one thing, which is that your much boasted modern education is precisely that which makes it difficult for you to understand theosophy. Your mind is so full of intellectual subtleties and preconception that your natural intuition and perception of the truth cannot act. And the direct outcome of this branch of education is an overflooding of the society with money-making machines, with heartless, selfish men who have been most carefully trained to prey on their fellows and take advantage of the ignorance of their weaker brethren. So instead, what should be encouraged, what should be done in whatever capacity we can do as a parent, as a guardian, as an educator, is that children should above all be taught self-reliance, love for all men, altruism, mutual charity, and more than anything else, to think and reason for themselves. Devote the time to the development and training of the inner senses, faculties, and latent capacities. Unquote. And with this, with all these things, if we say simply that that's why altruism is the key to theosophy. In one word we have to describe it, that altruism, love for everyone, if we develop in us, if we practice it, if we practice that process, that even the people whom we don't like, we try to send good thoughts, we will slowly, gradually change our constitution of our subtle bodies and our physical bodies. And we will make our constitution, our mind, much more suitable to receive the light of intuition or the homing signal. And slowly, by putting it in practice, of course, we may sometimes be wrong, sometimes be right, but taking all those things in our stride, we keep growing and help it strengthen the bond. So slowly and gradually, we have a continuous link with this inner homing signal or intuition. And once again, I thank you all, dear friends, brothers and sisters. I thank Brother Charlie Romero and Brother Vic Hao Chin for giving this opportunity to share some of the thoughts again with our learned audience. And thank you so much for patient hearing.
Thank you very much, Shikhar, for that very important topic. So we will now go into questions and answers. And our listeners who may wish to ask questions, you can unmute yourself or you can type in your questions in the chat box. Go ahead.
One thing, okay, if nobody is saying anything, I would just say that the last part that I discussed about education, I was very much inspired by the work that we see in Philippines with Golden Link schools and colleges, and on the same pattern, under the guidance in the same principle, that ATA school has been started in the headquarters of Theosophical Society in Adyar for being the center of the transformative education. I think that's a real way for the future.
Thank you, Shikhar. Now, one initial question. How would you incorporate the development of intuition in the educational system of young people? Would you have any idea about how to approach it?
Yes, actually, it's a very it's a topic since very close to my mind and heart also, and we have done an experiment also on that. And since Catalina is working in ATA, and the way the response of the children and their parents are, and even some of the difficult children who were brought in the school, how they changed with a different kind of atmosphere that they were provided. Because normally in most of the schools, when HPB is saying modern education, she was pointing towards the education of which is based on competition and punishments for disciplining a person, which is basically creating the fear in the minds of the children and the sense of inquiry, which is sometimes children are allowed or sometimes they are even afraid to ask. So if in the education what we see, if we can make it, or if since I am seeing it happening, that if we give them an environment which is free of competition and comparison, and I think as a parent we also unconsciously sometimes compare, so we have to be aware of that also, that with our child with some other child, because maybe we have been trained in that way, we have grown in that way, so that to be avoided in the school where they are going, instead of comparing them, they should be given an atmosphere where each and every one of them can express themselves in a unique manner. So without comparison and competition, because with that, the next step, and also the fear of punishment. Instead of that, as I learned from you only, that we can let them connect the action and the consequences, not the punishment. Because if we give some punishment for some action and there is no relation between them, the only thing we are going to put in the mind of the child is fear of the punishment. Not, he will not understand what he did wrong or where he could have, asked something more. Another thing, and the third is encouraging the sense of inquiry. So they ask more and more questions. They can ask, feel free to ask more and more questions without any fear, without of fear of being judged. And that's how, I think if we go like that, which in some of the schools and colleges they have already practiced, then I think it will be a good way to develop children who are who don't have those fears and jealousy or some kind of complex when they are compared with others. And just when I said we tried this, okay, we tried it on a little bigger students of graduation level when we conducted one camp in Indian section in Varanasi, which was not a camp actually, it was a workshop based on study, meditation, and selfless service. So we did study part aspect also. We had contemplations and silent periods also. We had meditation sessions also. And most importantly, we had the service sessions also. And by service, I mean that as a group, we had about 50 or 60 students from the graduation level from the college in Varanasi. So on one day, we decided that we'll pick up a place in the campus and we will all go there and clean it up. And the next day, we took another activity that's let us cook our food together, some people got the responsibility of cooking, some got the duty for serving, some got the duty for cleaning. And this group activity, I mean, when we had the feedback sessions, they said that they were looking for such kind of activities, not just theoretically, but practical applications also. And during this team activity, they tend to bond with each other as a person, not as a competitor or just as a fellow student. So all those things, when we did, the feedback was really that the youth want all this, but the only thing is how the way we are going to present it to them is what matters in my view. So
thank you. How about the nurturing of intuition in children, particularly?
I think that's what I feel. One of the things is to let them develop more hobbies. Whatever their hobbies are, whatever their inner call is, instead of just rejecting it as a passing phase or something, because we all know that up till the 7 years of age, the child is more in touch with the higher self. Later, slowly that affects reduces. So during that time, the more we give the child the freedom with our guidance, and to let him choose, let him feel whatever comes, to listen to them, what they want, what they feel. I think by that way we can develop their inner faculties. That is my thinking of a very simple in a household thing. I don't know if there may be some other ways, but that's what I think about it. Yeah.
All right. Here is a question from Alice about the mantra. Is it okay not to chant it, but to recite it silently with good intention?
Oh yes, actually, with the mantra, it is if we do it mentally, it is even more stronger than if we just chant it verbally or with the sound. Because with the sound, what happens, if we may be chanting the mantra, but our attention or the mind may be wandering somewhere else. Once we have remembered the mantra by memory, it's just like driving the car. Initially, we are aware of everything, so our whole concentration is there. But once we are, become a very expert in driving, we can drive, we can talk, and we can discuss things. And thank you for that, that the law has forbidden to use the mobile phones while driving, so that we don't end up in accident. That's what used to happen. So same thing goes with the chanting of the mantra, that okay, if you are doing it verbally, okay, but if you can do it mentally, it even has much more effect, because then our whole mind is engaged in that process. And not just chanting, if we can together visualize the meaning of the mantra, the idea behind the mantra, the whole effect will be the full potential of the mantra we can have. And one thing that I forgot to mention earlier in the thing about mantra, that was the effect when a single person does it. That's what happens. But the same experiment was done with a group of people in the group chanting, and what C.W. Leadbeater saw was that still that shaft of light comes, but instead of many individual rays of light, one big shaft of light comes which covers all the people. And then together as a unit, all these cones of light come out of that group. So, and to a much wider area and much longer distance it goes. So that tells us also the positive effects of group meditation or group chanting. It doesn't matter, since you are conducting every Sunday. So that is it doesn't matter we are in different parts of the world, but if we are meditating together or chanting together, the effect really increases exponentially instead of just arithmetically. So that's what it's about.
All right. There's a question here from Tamalia. She asks, is Shikhar a Filipino? What is his profession? Is what theosophy teaching not the base of what many New Age teachings are now based on? And are those theosophical teachings taken from Hinduism and Buddhism?
Sorry, I didn't get that. Can you please repeat?
Well, the first question was whether you were a Filipino.
Oh, no, I am Indian. I mean, the citizen. I have an Indian passport. But yes, I have worked with many of my Filipino friends when I was working on the ship. So I had worked with many Filipino friends. Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, she's asking, is what theosophy teaching not the base? Is it not the basis of what many New Age teachings are now based on?
Yes, totally. I think I would, although maybe my opinion or understanding can be called biased because I am a member of Theosophical Society. But if we go back in the history, if we see the sprouting of these, how these so many New Age organizations and New Age teachings started to come, if we go back, we can see the seeds planted by Madame H.P. Blavatsky. And it started, and she gave so much of literature and the terminology to explain all these things that I think many of the New Age teachings have taken a bit and pieces of those, and they have expanded them for their own organization or for own purpose of whatever they are following. So I think, yes, that Theosophy in that sense, in modern age, it is the mother of all such New Age teachings.
And her third part of the third part is, are those theosophical teachings taken from Hinduism and Buddhism?
Okay, you mean the other New Age teachings? Does she mean?
Theosophical teachings, are those taken from Hinduism and Buddhism?
I don't think so that they are taken from them. There are many commonalities between the teachings, but if we see, we can say that many of the theosophical teachings are from Upanishads and Mahayana Buddhism, that we study the literature, what HPB has given us. But what I feel is that in theosophy, there is something more and something in addition to those teachings when she is explaining not just the teachings, but with the scientific, or at least whatever science was available in her times, she was giving the logic and science behind all those things and setting up a common base for all the religions in the world, that the teachings in all the religions of the world are esoterically same. So, but I don't think that they are just taken from Hinduism or Buddhism, because even Hinduism or Buddhism, we can say, have come out from theosophy, because theosophy is eternal. Hinduism or Buddhism is not eternal. Theosophy as Brahma Vidya is the account of wisdom from immemorial ages, which is carried by the sages, by the great brotherhood, the seers who have been throughout all the ages. And from time to time, some teachings are given depending on the country, on the era, on the evolution of the individuals at that time. So that we call Hinduism or Buddhism or Islam or Sikhism. That's what my understanding is. Theosophy, I think, is basically the root, but we should not think theosophy as just theosophical society, because theosophical society is rather new, but theosophy is ageless wisdom, which has ever been.
Excuse me, I want to know if Brother Shikhar lives in Adyar.
Yes, Sister Sullivan, yes, we have been living.
Yes, because of your focus on childhood as the solution, you visit a good Montessori school right there around Adyar, because Dr. Montessori lived
yes,
Adyar and stayed in the Olcott's cottage. So for 10 years, she continued her research. Since I am managing 5 Montessori schools, I have seen how 3-year-old children to 5 can be conditioned to lab work.
Yes.
And be a different kind of child. So she would refer to the teacher in Montessori and the children as the new children and the new teacher. So please visit.
Yes, sure, Sister Sullivan. I would sure visit. And I have just one school right across the road, ATA. And I visited one Montessori school in Mumbai when I visited Mumbai. Yes, in last year. And I think from Mumbai we have Brother Bertie and Brother Pandyaji. So they took me around in the same campus. We have the Montessori school, and it was really a pleasure to see how something which children fear in normal way, like feeling fear to go to school, but instead there children would love to come to school, and when they are not going to school, it's like something bad for them. So that is a really turnaround of events, and I would try to visit some school here also.
Okay, thank you. Here is a question. From Esther, why does mantra play a very small or no part in theosophy meetings or practices?
Oh, well, I don't know why it does, but I think it does not, because in Theosophical society, if we see, we have a very basic understanding of freedom of thought. So nothing is imposed on any member of the Theosophical society. But everything is presented in front of the member. All the literature, all the ways and means and plus and minus, advantages, disadvantages of everything are given in all the literature that we have. But since the freedom of thought is given utmost importance, so it depends on the person to choose what is best possible for them. Similarly, like there is a book called Chakras and the Kundalini also in Theosophical literature, but we don't talk about awakening of Kundalini or doing any exercises about that, because it is very clearly mentioned by HPB that the consequences of doing so can be really dangerous if it is done without proper guidance or instruction. So literature is available for everything. It is only up to the individual how much use we want to make of it by doing the experiment upon ourselves. Okay, something is given, we experiment. If it helps us positively, we can continue with it and we can recommend to others. If they want to do it, it's up to them. And I think recently about this Gayatri mantra, I really think like that, because the acceptance to it is increasing worldwide, because I think a couple of months back there was a 2-day seminar in South America, and one of the member of Theosophical Society discussed this with me, some things about Gayatri Mantra, because they were doing a workshop on Gayatri Mantra. So it depends upon the approach of the person, the path of the person, what is and which stage of evolution is the person. All those things combinedly attracts us or repels us from certain things. So there is no thing to which is preventing not to use it. Thank you.
Okay. Here is our last question for today.
Yeah.
Is it okay to chant along with Brahmins in YouTube? Do you still get the benefit of chanting in a group where you are physically present?
Okay. In that sense, you mean to say if we are group chanting, but we are doing on YouTube online, we are not together physically, right? Yes. See, I think it would be the same benefit, because on a mental, depends on if we are chanting only verbally, that's a totally different thing. But if at the mental level while chanting, we are in communion with all those people, so because at mental level we find the time, the distance is very few. The moment we think, our thought is there. So at the mental level, the distance is not as much as the physical level. So if we are in communion in thought with all the group that is doing it, the effects can be really experienced. There is no difference in that. And I could say it with the personal experience that when we did a global 5 minutes silence, I think the president, Tim Boyd, and some other heads of the spiritual organizations did it in some time in, I think, May or June. During those 5 minutes, if one could feel the difference in energy, total difference. So it is possible, because although on mental level, physical level, we are so far, but if we are together at heart, in the heart and at our minds, there is no distance that is separating us. So it is useful. But although I think some people confuse it with playing it on a laptop or a musical instrument. So for that, I have certain reservations, because that is just the tape is playing. You are not adding your thought power to that chanting. It is good to listen to, it's okay. But if you add also your thought and will and intention behind that mantra, then it really becomes powerful and the effect can be experienced.
Okay, thank you very much, Shikhar. It was a wonderful session on an important topic. So we'll now be closing our session, and I'd like to ask Charlie to give your closing words. Charlie?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much, Brother Shikhar, for this substantial insights of yours, and which provides another building block to your earlier presentation last month. So thank you very much. And to our participants today, we also thank you for your comments and questions, which adds to the collective wisdom. So again, thank you, one and all, and have a pleasant day.
Thank you.